everybody, to another episode of Learn Biz. I'm your host, Ethan Migliori, with the world's best host, Ryan Murray. Hey, anytime you let me...
Straight face, straight. We're just...
Anytime you let me do the introduction, you're going to get something. And you know that, and
good,
you should know that by now.
Good. No, we're good.
So, kind of a fun one for me today. As I was reading some stuff on CNN Business, I always peruse kind of every few days what's going on in the world in business and changes are coming up. And I ran across, and I'd seen it before, but I hadn't really paid attention to it for a while. But I ran across CNN. They had, if you go into their business and you see at the very top, there's what they call their greed meter, right? And it's kind of fascinating because then they kind of look at it and say, hey, is our market in fear or are we in greed? Okay, based off of a number of factors and that affects this meter that they put out there. Which so as you go through reading through it and why they come up with greed based off of those different variables, I thought, hey, this would be a good one because right now there's, and another article that we'll reference as well that was also from CNN talking about corporate greed. And so since it's, I don't want to say it's a hot topic, but it's certainly on the minds of a lot of people who deal with economic issues and who are watching consumer indexes and everything that's going on. So to kind of say, all right, look, what are we seeing? What are people saying? And why are they saying it, right? Because if you don't track it every day, you kind of hear about it, but I always say it's like the Facebook post that someone puts out there that makes everybody mad that is only half truth, right? So when you hear about stuff or you catch a glimpse on the news because it's so short, all of a sudden you're like, wow, well, what is that one? And oh yeah, our corporation's really gouging me, is the word that people like to use. So that's where I want to talk about some of that today.
As we jump into this, I think it's important to put some quick definitions behind greed and fear in this context.
Good point.
Because, you start looking at the 7 deadly sins, and I don't think that's exactly it. This is not necessarily a moral, ranking.
Right.
This is more a direction of market movements and what to kind of expect. It's similar to say, bear and bullish.
Correct. Which one is driving the market?
So anyway, why don't you put some quick definitions behind what we're talking about when we say fear and greed?
Well, let's talk a little bit about, and I'm going to use some of their categories that they use when they talk about whether it's greed or fear. So when they talk about one of them that they use is market momentum. Okay, and so if you want to, if you're sitting at your desk or whatever else, and you want to pull them up, you can pull right up on CNN and kind of look at what we're seeing as well. But so basically, what they're looking at the momentum is the momentum of, in this case, the first one is most of them are tied to stocks in a way because it tells us a lot about what's going on. Is the momentum carrying in a bear or a bull market, right? Is it trending up or is it trending down?
Right.
Okay. And then so the very first one, the momentum, everything for the last 6 months is trending up, right? So because of that, when they look at that, but then they also look at
no, hang on. I apologize that I'm gonna be nitpicky on this because there's a lot of terms that people throw out there, and in finance, the funny thing about finance is understanding the cause and effect of finance. So every time something is trending up, something else is trending down to kind of balance that out and offset that. And when everything is moving in a certain direction, it kind of changes the market, right? And so when you're saying everything is trending up, we're specifically saying major stocks are trending
S&P
up.
Type stuff. So if they're trending up, but they're also trending up faster than the average. So you're even getting more of a gap there. It says that's where they say greed is driving it, right? Because when things are, it's like the gold rush of, the 1840s or 1849, what it is.
Yeah.
San Francisco 49ers, so 1849.
Yeah.
So when the gold rush happens...
I love how you have to bring that back to a sports team. I can get my history if I can tie it to sports.
There's some truth to that. kind of funny, actually, when you say it that way. But there were a number of different gold rushes, because there was one in Oregon, one in Alaska.
Yeah, but this is great, because the idea, you're still chuckling over the 49ers. The idea of greed in this instance is to say, was it bad that there was this gold rush? No, it wasn't necessarily bad. But you had a lot of people that they heard about gold, and so they all rushed to get there.
That's right.
And so what we're saying here is the markets are trending, and so people are rushing to get there. It's not that necessarily they're greedy. It's that they're saying, oh, there's opportunity, and then they kind of just keep moving to it. That's right. And it's interesting if you look at the gold rush, or my personal favorite is Tulip Mania. If you've ever studied Tulip Mania, okay, super fast on Tulip Mania.
Yeah, you're good.
So back in the Netherlands in the 1600s, and I apologize, I wasn't planning on doing this, and so I'm doing this a little bit off the cuff, but in the Netherlands in the 1600s, now you got to realize the Dutch were known for their banking, and they really were kind of a finance powerhouse in the 1600s. And so they started trading in tulips, and everyone knows you go to Holland for the tulips and the tulip festivals, and they're world known for the tulips. Well, they started trading in tulips that had abnormalities. So a regular tulip bulb will come out a solid color. But if it's got some, and I don't know the botanical term for it, but an abnormality, it will create patterns in the tulips, and they're a little bit more rare.
Okay.
Well, they started trading in these just like we trade in the stock market today. And it got to a point, in an extreme case, you could get a tulip bulb for more than a house with a farm. And I mean, I'm talking extreme cases, but
that's an expensive tulip.
So everyone was buying. And what happened is, first the wealthy were buying these tulips and trading these tulips, but then the greed rush got in, and you would see people that there's like, I want in on this.
And
so then
everything.
All of a sudden it floods the market with people who are not investors. They had no idea, they were just farmers.
Right.
And they're like, well, I know tulips, I can invest, but they didn't understand market fluctuation. Right. And then all of a sudden it crashed. And it's kind of documented as the first quote-unquote stock market crash globally. It wasn't a global crash, but in the world it was the first crash. And so it kind of set a precedent for a lot of these other things. You see the crash of 1929 and some of these things, and a lot of people will tie that back to Tulip Mania because of how interesting human behavior has not changed. Yeah. And so when you're talking about greed and it going up, and I look at that, I'm just like, like tulip bulbs. They put them in safety deposit boxes, like you'd have bulbs that were held in banks, and it was...
Really? Yeah. Because of their rarity.
It's fascinating to read.
Wow. That's that's cool. But that kind of also goes to one of the other measures that they use, and that is the strength of the stock. Mm-hmm. So they look at the 52-week high and the 52-week low, and what the difference is. So was the low greater than the high type of a thing, or how's it doing it? But when you look at the 52-week low, it was lower than the 52-week high. So we're still kind of in a weird way, we're in a fear or a cautious, because it was so low that it hasn't quite recovered. Even though if you watch it, they just recently hit over 40,000, which was another milestone, which is
on the Dow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on the Dow. Sorry. You and I know what we're talking about, but you need to make sure you keep filling in the blanks, and we'll be great. So that was fantastic to do that. So that kind of goes with that. When everyone is still cautious about it or jumping on, or the rush happens, So the rush is, even though we're in a greed, we aren't fully committed, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing it. We see the opportunities that are out there. We realize that, hey, there might be something here. A lot of people are watching it closely. There's some early adopters, like most bell curves, that are starting to invest in it. But it's always, people are right now, we're looking to say, hey, who are a few experts that we trust, and what are they doing, right? Mm-hmm. And when they start to shift, then I'll do the same.
Yeah.
So who knows if that will break out or not. But anyways, because of that, it's also leading, it's causing some of the inflation problems that we still are facing. And the Federal Reserve is kind of saying, well, we're not gonna drop things quite yet because of that. So the next one that they use is the stock price breadth. And this one they said is clearly an agreed. And this is kind of when they're looking at the buying patterns of everything that are going on and the diversity of it. Is it one industry that is everyone's just buying in, or is it across
right.
Is it across the gamut that more things are doing well, right? Because the more that are doing well shows that there's more strength behind it versus if it's just one sector that they're doing. And so when you look at that, there's a wider range of stocks that are really doing well, not just a certain sector. Because when you get into a market that is driven by fear, it's always a couple segments that do well, and the rest are hurting. So,
which is kind of interesting, and I want to know. I want to get your take and a little bit of your opinion on this. So the terms fear and greed both have a negative connotation behind them.
They do, which is interesting that they use those words.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what I want to hit on here for a second, because you're talking about how we're in a greed market. Things are definitely trending in a greed direction. They're continuing to trend in that. When you're talking about the bell curve and you're saying we still got some early adopters, which indicates that it's probably going to expand from here further into greed. So just for the benefit of the listeners, would you say that are we trying to get an equilibrium? Are we trying to not go too high on the greed side, not go too low on the fear side? Or is it more just watching that it's like, look, this is the natural ebb and flow, and understanding that seasons change. There's summer followed by fall, followed by winter.
There is some natural flow. And on that, and on that last one as well, on that breadth there, they also look at the difference. So when you're in a greed market, it's driven by stocks. And when you're, when they say you're living in a fear market, you're driven by something more conservative like bonds. Mm-hmm. So they also look at the difference, the gap between the interest rates that the average, S&P 500 or the Dow Jones are paying compared to bonds. And if that gap gets bigger, right, then that tells you that it's greed. If it starts getting closer with those payouts, because then you're going to shift to bonds because they're more conservative. You're not afraid of losing money in them.
So, okay, but this is where it gets really interesting to me. And I've been reading a lot on this. In fact, I just had a conversation yesterday about AI in stock trading and using AI to pick stocks, which I'm torn. Personally, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, does this become an equalizer? Like the internet to me became an equalizer.
There was a study just recently, and it'll be interesting to see what happens again this summer. But last year with AI, as it came out, they used AI to predict horse racing. Mm-hmm. It couldn't do it. It couldn't do it. Well, given all the variables and everything else, you'd think that it could do it. It couldn't pick it any better than a parrot just with its best guess.
So, and that's the interesting thing. A lot of people don't understand.
I don't know if it can or can't.
When you talk about AI, and I don't know that I want to get too far into AI. And honestly, I'm not anywhere close to an expert on AI, so I want to be careful to not, give this impression that hey, I know everything. I'm kind of in the mix of I'm trying to figure this out. But I talk to a lot of people that really understand AI, and one of the points that they keep making is to say, well, what AI does is it's a math equation where it's collecting all of this data and then it's just spitting out probabilities.
Right.
And so
but that's interesting. So if you do, and this is a great point when you talk about probability, when you get into statistics and probabilities and percentages. Probabilities and percentages. So like voting is an interesting one. Okay, so if someone has 51% of the vote, okay, well, versus 49, you're thinking, wow, that's not much of a thing. But the probability of them winning is like 70 or 80%, right?
Yeah.
So even though the percentage of what they show for voter support is very small or difference, the probability is completely different.
Yeah. And so you get into this situation where we're looking at stocks. Now, I want to bring up another point, and I'm trying to tie all this in because we're starting to get a little bit rabbit hole here.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's a good discussion.
So, an interesting thing about stocks, and this is a complaint that's happening, is the wealth spread, and I'm going to talk specifically to the United States, right? So what's happening is more of the wealth is being controlled by a very small percentage of the population. And I've recently read some different articles on that, and I find it fascinating. I didn't realize if you look at the average age that it takes to buy a house, and it used to be back in the 20s. When you were in your 20s, you know that was the average age to buy a house. It's now up in the 40s, and I think to myself, wow, how in the world would I expect my kids to not be able to buy a house until they're in their 40s? That just blows my mind, because by the time you're in your 40s, you're looking at like paying off your house, or you should be looking at paying off your house.
And yet now at 40s, now you have a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah.
You're 70?
Yeah, which...
You die with a mortgage?
Right. And so...
Blows my mind.
So you look at the stocks and we're saying, okay, greed, but I'm saying, well, wait a second, because we're pulling out the middle class from this equation. Maybe. And so if stocks are being driven more by, professional investors, AI technology, the hyper wealthy, the ones that are really controlling the stock markets, and they're the ones, like, maybe this isn't market sentiment, maybe this is minority sentiment, where, and this is happening, you see this a lot. Wow, I'm really on some rabbit holes. But you see this a lot with some of the different social issues that are hitting, where it really is a minority that is kind of making an issue become a majority issue. I look at the presidential election that's coming up. It blows my mind that we don't spend time talking about what 90% of the president is going to do in his job. We focus on this 10%, like, well, what do you think about this really weird small issue over here?
Right.
And we start making our decisions. So instead of looking and saying, hey, this guy's the commander in chief, so how is he going to manage the military? Hey, what exactly do we plan to do with our economics? What's the vision as the leader, as the executor for the country? No, we don't look at that. We look at all these small, minor issues, and then we start voting based on that. And so I'm wondering, on this, do we feel like this is really the sentiment of the majority, or is this the sentiment of those who are controlling the dollars in the stock market?
Oh, I don't know if I want to answer that one.
And I know.
I'll give you my thoughts, because...
And let's be clear. Neither you nor I know. So anyone that's listening right now, we're in opinion land, okay? This is not...
Yeah, but I think your opinion and my opinion have some merit. So
I'm not
here's
trying
here's
to...
the interesting thing about stocks
ahead.
Is that you have a huge middle class is a huge class, right?
Yeah,
it's
volume wise,
right. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of the middle class that work for companies that have retirement plans. Mm-hmm. Those retirement plans are all based around investments, right? And you can pick and choose those investments and modify it based off of how you feel the market's doing, or you can just pick something that's going to, give you 3% every year and call it good. But so with that in mind, I don't think it's a small majority that's necessarily driving it, because I think you have a huge middle class that look at the stock market for retirement purposes in the long run, but that's not accounting for those specialty stocks that sometimes do have a way of helping drive the market.
But this is where I'm going to argue that point. I would agree. You look at how much middle class money is tied up in retirement accounts. But then let's contrast that with how fluid or liquid are those retirement accounts as opposed to...
Oh, they're not.
Yeah. So once I park my money into a retirement account, I'm not looking at it or moving it anywhere close to someone who's an active trader.
No, that's true.
And that's so true. If I'm seeing trends that are moving, and I don't know, that's when I said we're in the land of opinion, I'm just trying to be clear that I don't have the data to back this up. I'm looking at it and saying, okay, here's some questions that are in my mind to say, is the movement that we're seeing in this study, is it coming from the majority, or is it coming from a minority who's actually adjusting according to trends?
The numbers are all based off of S&P or Dow Jones.
Okay.
So you could probably do a quick search and figure out what's driving both of those.
Well, now that's interesting.
And then have a better feel.
If you look at retirement accounts, I mean, S&P and Dow Jones, that's where most people are going to put it. There are thousands of stocks out there.
That's right.
And if you look at, so S&P 500, Dow Jones 30, you're not dealing with that many stocks.
No. Well, but that's what they look at is they take, like one of the other measures that they look at is they also look at the volatility of that stock over a time frame. And then they take the middle ground on it. So they, it's high and it's low. But when you look at that range and it's been bouncing back and forth, it's almost a flat line when you take that average out. And so the volatility is not trending necessarily staying higher versus lower. It's still bouncing quite a bit. So they say, hey, it's a little bit more neutral here, but because of all the other factors, it tips it in the favor of being on the greed side of their meter.
Okay, so I want to pause for a second. I've taken you down a few rabbit holes. What are some other key takeaways? Are there any other key takeaways that we really want to touch on?
No, I don't. So anyways, with that, then it actually, so I don't know that there's more key takeaways on that much. Is it as much as it's kind of interesting and it's fun to check and watch because, if you're doing anything and you're getting close to retirement, you want to be watching this stuff anyways. But that led me to another article that was about the same time frame that I saw that a week ago, that then talked about, hey, is corporate greed driving the inflation? Mm-hmm. Are they gouging us? And so there was an article that was released by the San Francisco Reserve Bank that kind of said, no, it's not the only factor, right? But at the same time, that article, if you chase that one and track it down and read it, the San Francisco one kind of comes out and says, hey, there's three things that we think are driving the inflation. One is labor costs, mm-hmm. right? Which has been a huge thing since COVID started. And I found that I really want to work somewhere else and I'm not being paid much. Anyway, so it's kind of shifted that and minimum wage. And there's been tons of discussion about wages. So I wasn't surprised at that one, even though we've kind of forgot about it. Mm-hmm. The other one is, which is interesting that they brought it up again, is that supply chain mm-hmm. is still not normal yet.
Oh yeah, it's broken.
There's still disruption in that, mm-hmm. which is causing a lot of problems still. And then they kind of say because of those main two, we have some other ones, but those two are the main ones driving inflation right now. But then the next argument in the article as you get into it is, yeah, but if you watch any news and if you're watching anything about large, companies, especially in consumer goods and especially with gasoline, they're all posting record profits, right? So how can you So the argument is how can you on one hand say, well, we can't get stuff, our supply chain's messed up, but then you're making huge profits. Mm-hmm. It's counterintuitive in so many people's minds. Mm-hmm. So it was really, I mean, the article is good because it starts talking about both sides of that and arguments for it. So the article was pretty neutral, which was nice. It wasn't just, hey, we think it's all corporate greed. They laid out a number of other things like labor and supply chain, and you have ties into manufacturing, and I deal with manufacturing companies on and off, and we know that there's supply chain problems still, especially, matter of fact, the one port, like the bridge back in
Maryland,
in Baltimore that collapsed. I mean, now you don't get boats through there, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, what do?
Yeah.
Well, it causes a disruption. It may not affect us on the West Coast, but certainly does on the East Coast, right? So now you got to reroute it, or you got to figure something else, so anyways, so we do know that that's a huge issue, and even to this day, some ports, it's not uncommon for a ship to sit out there for 5 days, waiting to finally get in to be unloaded.
So I want to take a key piece that you've been touching on here, and I want to tie it into small business decision making, because a lot of times I feel like entrepreneurs feel a little bit disjointed. They're like, okay, so the Dow is up. Honestly, if I track my profits and I track the Dow, there's no correlation. I'm in a smaller market. I'm not a mover, and sometimes they feel a little bit disjointed. Well, here's a key takeaway that I think is very critical for small businesses to understand. And when you're talking about labor, so a lot of times small businesses are ignorant to the trends that are happening in labor. You might not be competing against General Electric.
Right.
They're in a different industry. They're so big, and you're like, I don't compete against them, but you compete against them for wages.
Right.
And so if you're trying to hire someone, and small businesses, they don't understand this because they look at it and they say, well, I can't compete. I'm like, you can actually. There are a lot of people who love the autonomy of working for a small business. They love the flexibility. They love the opportunity for growth. They're driven to the vision or kind of the ethics of a small business. Right. But it's important to understand if labor costs are driving inflation, you've got a chicken and an egg scenario here, because on the one hand, labor is going up, causing inflation to go up. On the other hand, those that missed the boat, that they're still stuck in the low wages, they're looking at inflation going up and feeling their wages getting cut.
That's right.
And whether I work for a major company or whether I work for the local print shop down the road, I still have to buy groceries. I still have to pay for gas. I still have to pay for my kids' clothes. And so I can't look at this, and if I see that labor has gone up 10%, I can't think to myself, well, we give 3% cost of living wages, and so I'm good. I have to realize I'm now competing, and I guarantee your employees are out there looking. They know what's out there. They know what's available. And loyalty will only get you so far.
Oh, especially with the younger generation. There's no loyalty.
Yeah. And so, if you are a small business and you're saying, I can't find good employment or good employees, not employment. If you're a small business and you can't find good employment,
you're in trouble.
You should tell the rest of your company that it's in that bad of shape. No, I can't find good employees, and their work ethic is garbage. I'm like, no. There are people who have bad work ethic, and if you're constantly scraping the bottom of the barrel, if you're having to deal with that, change your model.
Right, I totally agree.
Improve your business so that you can attract some better talent. There are people with work ethic. I don't care if they're millennials or Gen Alpha now? Like, what generation are we on? I don't remember.
I don't know. Probably Alpha or Beta.
Something. But, everyone complains about the younger generation. And I'm like, guess what? They're amazing. I'm going to call them kids. I'm old enough to call them kids now. Back in my day, those young whippersnappers, they're amazing kids who want to do good things. And they want to work hard, but they want to work hard on their terms. And if you don't read this stuff and understand, hey, this is the changing tide, then you miss out.
Right. Well, and there was, there's some great stuff out there about hiring and what's going on with labor and things like that. It just, if you haven't done researches lately, you need to be doing that, because there's great advice, there's great counsel on it, but at so many levels, right now there's a predominantly, and has been for a while, dissatisfaction of employees in the workplace, right? And there's a number of reasons for it, but yeah, you need to be looking at that and reevaluating what you're doing.
Yeah. So I want to shift to the other thing, supply chain, and I want to give a little bit of advice here.
Okay.
Major companies. So I look at companies, and I'm going to pick on retailers. So you got Walmart, you got Home Depot, you got IKEA, Best Buy. Like these guys, Target, they're huge.
Right.
Where's their supply chain? China.
Yeah.
And that's what's been disrupted. If you are a small business today, you have a competitive advantage if your supply chain is not linked to the same supply chains that all the major retailers are linked to. And now is the opportunity to take your product and say, look, I know I'm a little bit more expensive, but I'm reliable.
Yeah.
I can get this shipped to you, and I'll tell you, major retailers, they look for it. They want that. They actually want to work with small businesses.
If they don't have product on their shelf, they don't make money.
Yeah. And they're looking for unique product. They're looking for locally sourced product.
Right.
And so if you can get your supply chain that is not tied up in the same traffic jam that everyone else is in, you have a huge competitive advantage.
Well,
use it.
But that's an interesting point, because the article kind of touches on it, and I thought I wish they would have explored it more. And that is part of, the reason why we're seeing some increases in pricing is because when we solely rely on American-made products, they're more expensive.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
Period. There's another argument on whether they're better or not. I don't want to go down that one, but American products, because our labor costs are higher, they're always going to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. And especially when we start getting away from foreign oil, and we're only taking oil out of American soil or close neighbors, it's more expensive. Oil companies, I'm not going to do price per barrel, but I'll use it in price per gallon because most people relate to that. But on average, oil companies don't want to pull any oil out of the ground unless the price of the pump is $3 a gallon or more. Mm-hmm. It's not worth it for them. They don't make enough profit to say, yeah, let's do it. So, but that's the whole problem that we struggle with for years and years, is because then you start getting high American oil companies drill, that we're becoming more self-sufficient, and then some other country releases a whole bunch of oil, drives that price back down. American companies stop drilling. As soon as that happens, our price of gas goes sky high again because of how cartels work. And then American oil start drilling, and it takes some time before they start leveling out the market again. But so my argument is always, if you really want gas to stay consistent, we need to have it right around $3 a gallon. If you're in that price range, you know that it's probably going to stay there for a long time. But as soon as it starts dipping into the twos, like you see in some places, I'm just like, oh no, a swing is coming, and it's going to hit that $4 mark again, because it just that trend shows it.
Yeah.
So, and a couple other things in the article that it brought up about greed was also that you're seeing a lot of products where they're calling shrinkflation, where I buy a candy bar and it's 20% smaller than what it used to be.
Oh yeah.
So same price but less product. Okay, so you're seeing some of that's going on. And then it brought out an excellent one, and that is that no matter what side of the fence you're sitting on, everyone is throwing scapegoats out there that it's this, no, it's that, it's this, and saying, watch out, don't get suckered going down the road with the scapegoats, understand it for what it really is, knowing that it's a combination of a lot of things, that it's affecting what we're doing, and that's driving that inflation and keeping it high. And even, just even recently, the Federal Reserve says, no, we're not, going to quite drop it, even though some other people I follow say, why haven't they dropped it yet? What's their issue?
Yeah.
But their argument is that the consumer indexes are still not where they need to be. They talk, they use a reference of, that we're still floating over 2%, and they want it to be under that before they start dropping it again, even though it's like 2.1, 2.2. It's really close.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument is if you start dropping some of that interest rate, then some of the bigger ticket items that we'd want to spend our money on instead of just putting money in the bank, because that's what everybody did during COVID, is putting money in the bank. And the problem is when it's in the bank, you don't have that cash out in the community stirring up and, shifting around and circling. And so when it's locked in a bank, it drives inflation too.
Yeah.
So that's, anyways, hopefully that helps a little bit if, as you see articles about what's really going on, the greed index or, corporate greed, look at it for what it really is. I get both sides of the argument, and it's obvious that middle ground is really where a lot of it's following. And are there some decisions that could be different? I think so, personally. But it is what it is right now. So.
No, interesting. A lot of good points, a lot of good takeaways. Any other thoughts you want to pull from either of those articles?
No.
Okay.
I think we shared enough on that, and I don't know, maybe we'll do a follow-up in a few months on it, because I'm guessing still that the Fed is going to cut some interest rates here in the next 60 days because of how things are trending. It'll be interesting to see how that maybe affects that CNN's greed scale.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up right there. Thank you so much for joining us on LearnBiz. If you like our content, you can follow us on YouTube, here on the podcast, on every major podcast platform. Website is learnbiz.co, and you can reach out to us, Ryan or Ethan, at learnbiz.co. And we will catch you next time. Take care.
Thanks.